Okay, we're live, so we'll call the meeting to order. With no further ado, then, we'll move right into our program. And I'm very happy to say tonight that both candidates for Democratic congressman here in this district, District 17, is Matthew Montavon on my left and Alan Spence on my right. And they've graciously agreed to appear before us tonight. And what we'll do, we'll start with Matthew, and he'll make an opening statement of 5 minutes, and then Alan will have the same opportunity. Then we might go back just a minute for another comment, and then we'll go right to questions. I think that's what people are more interested in probably. And we see Dave Taylor's ahead of us. He has the clock for 5 minutes. So Matthew, with no further ado, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation. And thank you all for your service. My parents were both in the military. They met, and they were both in the Navy during World War II, met during the Navy, and stayed together for their entire lives, and produced 9 children. I'm one of 9. So I've lived in Italian a long time. I don't think that was an influence. So they were Catholic. That was so I didn't do military service, but I was in the Peace Corps. I was not ready to go in the military, but I did serve in the Peace Corps, and it was a different type of service, but I was also very rewarding and very maturing for a young man. A little bit about my background. I studied political science and Spanish at Catholic University, and then I studied public administration at Indiana University. And some of the jobs I've had, I started off a first major job. I did a lot of odd jobs during college, making a bit of income to support myself. But my first major job was with the Illinois Migrant Council. I was working with migrant farm workers, traveling through the sort of migrant trail from Texas and Florida, going up to the Minnesota, harvesting as they went along, and providing them with education and food or gasoline. And then I worked for a number of planning councils. I was advisor to local governments, county commissions, and so forth, writing plans, providing analysis and advice to local governments. And then I went to work for the United Nations, and I was with the Food and Agriculture Organization based in Rome, Italy, and they're addressing food and hunger around the world. So I was a senior officer. My last job was with a department of 500 people with a $500 million budget. And I was in charge of the budget and monitoring administration and providing HR services, whatever was needed to make things work. What does that add up to? It adds up to a person who shows commitment to the community and to his country through the Peace Corps. It adds up to a person who's knowledgeable about government and understanding how governments work, the type of budget, administrative, but also negotiation and dealing with people of all different types. I've worked in very conservative areas with Republicans. I worked with people from around the world, China, Mali, Pakistan, everybody around the world, and learned how to make friends and work together. I'm also very committed to the community. I do a lot of volunteer work. My biggest job here in Florida was with the AARP, and I do tax servicing. And I've done that for the last 7 years, helping people at the library to get their taxes done, a free service. I've also been picking up jobs here and there, whatever needed to be done. When Hurricane Ian hit, I would go down there for a few days and help with preparing food for people, for the rescue workers and for people whose homes had been destroyed. I've also been very involved in the Democratic Party, and I've always done that most of my life. I'm a committed Democrat and supporter of the Democratic Party. While I was in Italy, I was chair of the Central Italy chapter of Democrats Abroad. So that's making sure people vote, making sure they get their absentee ballot in, making sure they know the rules, and collecting ballots from the Americans at our agency and people we knew, and taking it to the embassy so they could be mailed. I was here in Sarasota. I've been helping canvassing and various elements around with the party, and I was president of the Sarasota Democratic Hispanic Caucus. And so I believe I have a background that could make a difference in Congress. I want to make changes. We've all seen the horrible activities going on, and now we're on the verge of another war, and we don't want to see thousands dying. And for what? Without Trump talking to the people, without Trump convincing Congress, and just on his own deciding this would be a nice thing to do. So we've got to put a stop. This is the most egregious attack on our democracy, but it's happened in so many ways. And we've got to put a stop to it, and that's my mission. That's what I'm driven to do, is help us control what is going on in Washington. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here to this forum. Thank you for the service to your country. I'm not a veteran. I did not have the privilege of serving. I do come from a background of veterans. My grandfather, he flew C-130s, is involved in the Korean War at the tail end, at the beginning of the Vietnam War, and he served for many years. I have families who fought in World War I, World War II, the Civil War as well, and the Second Seminole War. My great-grandfather was actually killed in that war. But for me, I've lived in Florida my whole life. I'm a native Floridian, and I graduated college. I graduated high school, and then I went to college at the University of South Florida, where I earned a bachelor's degree in economics. There, I lived in St. Petersburg for many years of my life, and it was hard for me. The struggle was real. I live paycheck to paycheck. I understand what it's like when something happens to your budget. You get a flat tire, you go to urgent care. There's zero margin for error. Many people don't have the savings they need. Many people are finding it difficult to get by. It's not a memory for most people in this district, the people of Sarasota, Charlotte, and Lee County. This is reality. We have retirees on fixed incomes. We have working families that struggle to get by. I met my wife when I was 17, working at Publix in North Fort Myers at the very southern edge of the district, just outside of it. She worked in the office, and I worked in the produce department. I ran the dairy case as well. We built a wonderful life together. Right now, we have a 14-year-old son, and right now I give back to my community. I serve as my son's assistant scoutmaster with the Scout Troop in Punta Gorda. So if your organization ever finds the need to have a dignified flag retirement, you can always give me a flag, and I'll happily take it to our Scout Troop. We do dignified flag retirement several times a year at different campouts. My campaign is based on 3 North Stars. Number 1 is economic prosperity. You all should have something in front of you. On the back of my rack card, it's called the Prosperity Agenda. And that is the plan to win the war on affordability. That's my first North Star. My second North Star is to protect and strengthen Social Security. Specifically, we can do that by getting rid of the wage cap. If we get rid of the wage cap, if you make more than $180,000 a year, you can afford to keep paying Social Security taxes. If we do that, we can buy another 10 years to 20 years of solvency. Right now, the trust fund's expected to run out of money in 2032. When that happens, your benefits will be cut if you're on Social Security by about 25%. Congress keeps kicking the can down the road, and the time for action is now. The current representative, Greg Stubbe, has had many years to fix this problem, and he hasn't. And for him, he would probably be happy if it went away. We know that he was happy when the Affordable Care Act subsidies went away. And there's over 100,000 people in this district who rely on those subsidies to buy health care. Those people are entrepreneurs and the most vulnerable. As you go through this forum and you listen to me throughout this campaign, you need to ask yourself questions. You have an important choice to make in this. We have to pick the candidate that will win. The candidate that will win will hold the incumbent accountable. He should not get a free pass for being absent, for refusing to hold a town hall, for refusing to speak to his constituents. That is not how the founders of this republic envision the members of the House to act. Number 2, which candidate understands the issues the best? Number 3, which candidate is running a more effective campaign, including social media and online? And which candidate will be able to defeat Donald Trump's right-hand man in Congress this upcoming November? Those are the questions that you have to ask yourself as we go through this primary campaign. Again, I thank you for your service. One of the fundamental things that I believe is wrong with this country is that we ask young men and women to kill other people in the name of our country too easily. There have been too many wars that we have waged that have been a rich man's war and a poor person's fight. And we just saw this country go to war with Iran. Was America actually threatened by that? There was no sale to the American people, and there was no vote in Congress prior to action. That is the American way, if you look at the Constitution. Thank you for your time.
I'll mention one thing to our audience. You probably noticed that the representative is not here. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, this is a primary. He doesn't have an opponent on the Republican side. And number two, when in the general election, our group has invited Representative Stubbe to appear. I'm not sure if it's 2, 3, or 4 times, but many times. He never even responds to our invitations. And that to me is unacceptable for a representative. And I understand it's not just our group. It's pretty typical around the district. So my first question to these gentlemen is, how in the world do you expect to win when this district last election was won by Stubbe by 28 points? And I'll start with you, Alan.
Well, it starts with a conversation. We have to, number one, we have to add people to the Democratic Party. We need to be welcoming. We don't need to attack people for wanting to join the anti-Trump coalition. We need to win NPA voters. We need to win Republicans in order to win this seat. I plan on doing that by, number one, reaching out to the business community. I worked at a startup. I helped scale up a startup. I want to explain to business owners and those people impacted by businesses impacted by tariffs that their businesses are being harmed by the policies that Greg Stubbe has supported. We can talk about the tariffs, or we can talk about the ACX subsidies. Many of the people who were getting the ACX subsidies were sole proprietors who own businesses. They might be a plumber or an electrician. All of these people have to pay more. So we have to explain that the politics of chaos and retribution that Trump is doing, that Stubbe supports, is actually harming them. The things the Republican Party stands for, actually, they're doing the opposite. If you look at the size of the budget deficit, it's growing. If you look at the size of the federal government, it's growing. Just today, I saw that the DHS bought 2,500 cars that the agents won't use. A 28-year-old who had no experience, who was a political operative, was put in that role. And now these cars sit in parking lots. That's the waste, fraud, and abuse that they speak so much about. But lastly, I believe that I'm the candidate that it can appeal to them. If you haven't heard, I have voted for both parties, candidates from both parties in the past. And my loyalty is to my country. It's not to a person. It's not to a party. And for me, January 6th was a turning point. It was a watershed moment, and I can't go back there. Donald Trump is the greatest con man in the history of the world, definitely of this country. He told me that they were the party of law and order, that they were the party of fiscal responsibility, and they are not. I know that now, so I won't be making the same mistake. Who really wants to be in the same party as Stephen Miller and Bridget Ziegler? I know I don't. So we need a big tent coalition. The Democratic Party needs to be a big tent anti-Trump coalition. And that's the kind of candidate that we need. That's the kind of candidate we need, one that can build that coalition. My opponent attacked me this past weekend at a debate where he talked about my voting record. But the reality is we need to reach out to people and unite people. We need to stop dividing people. We need to reach out to people on the other side, and I can do this. I can tell them that I've been in your shoes. It is okay. I welcome you into this coalition that we're building. So those are some of the ideas that I have on how I can attract Republicans. There's 280,000 Republicans in this district if you look across all three counties. There's 140,000 Democrats, and there's a mixture of NPAs. So the Democrats cannot win this election on their own. They need help from people on the other side. And it's not enough just to hope that the tides are going to change and we're going to do something. The time to act is now. That's why I'm running. I'm running because I see my country slipping away, and I want to save it. This is a lesson from history, from countless countries, countless experiences, that when you see things change, you need to speak out and you need to take action. And that is what I'm doing. We have an absent representative that is a coward. That's another thing I'm going to do in a general election. I'm going to tell the story about our cowardly representative who is too afraid to have a town hall. He's too afraid to speak to his constituents. I'm running my campaign like I am that person now. My campaign has had over 7 events the past several months, including an immigration town hall at the Sarasota Library a couple weeks ago. And we're having a town hall on public health because of things like the vaccination rate being low. There's an outbreak of measles right now in this state. And we need to get a focus on public health. So we're having a town hall on public health where I, at those events, take questions from the audience, unscripted, and answer questions off the cuff. And I give specific answers on the things that I will do. Thank you.
One thing I'll mention before we go to Matthew, as a veterans group, probably 95% of the people in this room know it, but you should know that Representative Stubbe always brags about how much he supports veterans. But when it comes right down to it, he always votes against us. If you can believe this, if you don't know, he voted against the PACT Act. And of course, that's very important to all of us. With that, Matthew.
Thank you. Alan, I didn't attack you. I'm expressing the differences that we have. And I welcome you to the Democratic Party. But I cannot welcome you to represent me when you just joined the Democratic Party right before signing up to run. And I have to question your judgment. You knew that Trump hated immigrants. He called them racist and murderers. During his administration, he was defending white supremacists. He was trying to throw out people. He had the Muslim ban. There was a number of other things he did that clearly said he was a racist. But it took you a long time to recognize that. So I think one of the important things of being a representative is to have the judgment in the right place at the right time. And now we've got Trump, and it's because people continued to vote for him, even though they could see he was an evil, racist, rapist, hated immigrants, and was a con man. And I saw that before he was elected, and a lot of people did. To bring people together, I think we have to focus on the issues. Issues are the big thing in an election. And I will focus on democracy, on affordability, and on immigration. I think so many people are upset. Veterans, people who fought for it, are upset to see that our democracy might be slipping away. We have to preserve it. We have to see so many of the things that Trump has done, thrown out inspectors general, thrown out U.S. attorneys, so many elements, ignoring laws, taking bribes from foreign governments. All these things we've all seen them, and they seem to come out daily. We've got to preserve our democracy. And a lot of people vote for that. Affordability. We've seen the ACA subsidies cut. We've seen SNAP cuts and other food aid cut. And it's for what? To give tax breaks to the super rich. We're becoming an autocracy, an oligarchy, where they're buying elections and they're making the laws for themselves, for their own Wealth, how rich do they have to be? Now we're going to start counting billionaires instead of millionaires. It's not America for all. We need an economy for all. And it's not just a question of protecting business. Of course, business is going to be interested, but everybody's interested, and it's because they're being affected by the abuse we've seen in this government. And we've seen it in the streets with the immigration. Two people being killed, people being tossed, thrown around, beat up on the sidewalks, a pregnant woman dragged off, citizens even dragged off, put them into detention centers. They're building these detention centers. I think Stephen Miller owns stock in these companies, and we're locking people up across the country. Tens of thousands, it's now 70,000 people locked up. For what? For the profit of these detention, these prison owners. Because they don't need to be locked up. You know where they are. They're working. They've got families. They got kids. And families ripped apart. Is this America? Is this the shame we have to live through? It gets me upset even talking about it. But that's what drove me to run. We've got to make a difference in this country. We've got to protect our country. I know my parents fought for this country, and they're buried in the military cemetery there north of Tampa. We've got to preserve. We've got to fight and make a difference and preserve what was built over these 250 years. And so that's why I'm here, and that's what I'll be fighting for. And I've been after Stubbe for the last 3 years, writing about him, and I'll continue to do it and lay out those accusations to win this election.
Okay, we know that this Iraq war is costing us $1 billion, or some people say $2 billion a day or more. So the next question is, would you vote for a supplemental appropriations bill to fund the Iran war?
No, I would not vote for a supplemental bill to fund that war. We need to have another vote in Congress. We need to understand a couple things. We need to understand, what is the objective? What is the goal? Is it regime change, or is it something else? All I know is right now, we eliminated their leader, and there's a more hardline person that's running that country's government right now. Seems counterproductive if your goal was to change the government. We can only probably change the government if we have boots on the ground. America is scarred by the war in Iraq and a legacy that left. When I was in high school, Bill Clinton was the president. And I remember taking economics class and the teacher talking about how we had a budget surplus and how we were going to lower taxes and have wonderful social services the rest of our lives. And then we had the tragedy of 9/11, and we saw our country attack Afghanistan, which I support. I've maybe supported a different approach than what we ended up with, but I supported that initial special forces approach before it was turned over to conventional forces. And then in Iraq, we saw $1 trillion spent. We saw tens of thousands of Americans killed, countless Iraqis killed, for something that really made Iran more powerful. Actually, if you look at the Iraq war, it was a war in which Iran became more powerful and took over southern Iraq. So we have this history of our foreign policy objectives not leading to the desirable outcomes. And I think this is another situation where we don't know what the objective is. So how can we fund a war where we don't know what the objective is? So that's where I stand on that. I would not support that. I also do not support what we've been doing with the boats off of the coast of Venezuela, and how we have Pete Hegseth acting as judge, jury, and executioner for those people on those boats. Because in America, we don't execute people who are convicted of drug crimes that way. We actually put to jury trial, and then we put them in prison if they're guilty. We don't execute them. So one of my priorities is the end of corruption in Washington, D.C., and that starts with holding people accountable who have done illegal actions. This includes people like Pete Hegseth, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Stephen Miller, all of these people. But it's very sad what's happening to our military right now. I feel a lot of the good generals, the good officers, they've resigned. They resigned with this boat operation in the Caribbean, and now we have a lot of more loyalists left in the military right now. So no, I would not support this war. I'm against it. I think it's not about is the war just or not? Should Iran been attacked or not? That's a whole different question. The problem that I have is that Trump started this war. He should only be able to attack other countries if Americans are in immediate danger. He should have sold the war to Congress and the American people, like I've seen prior in my lifetimes. The war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, there was an authorization to use military force passed by Congress. And this is just one of those things that I'm against, and we can have a debate on if we want to go to war with Iran or not, but the way it was done was not right, and I cannot support that because of that.
I would not support an appropriation for Iran at this moment. It's definitely we're going to war without convincing the American people, without having the authorization of Congress, and without any clear objective. We've seen this story before. I was in the Vietnam time, and I read the whole Pentagon Papers, all whatever 500,000 pages it was, and I got the story of how we get into these things, and that's you trickle in, and it just becomes bigger and bigger. And I walk when I visit Washington, gone quite frequently to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and the impact is just incredible. And you've probably all been there. And you start, and you start down the walk, and you get a few names, and then they build up, and more and more and more, until it adds up to some 65,000, 70,000 names of people who were killed in the war. And for what? It didn't make, well, some of you might disagree with me, but to me, that war did not make sense. It did not make sense because it was a colonial war that we took over from France. And now Vietnam's a great place to live. My partner's daughter is actually running a beach resort there on an island in the South Sea, what they call it, the Gulf of Siam, Phu Quoc, in case any of you are interested in going. And then Iraq. I think that was also in an unjustified war. They built that up under falsehoods, where we still haven't found those chemical plants where they were building biological weapons. We're still, they don't exist, and it upset the whole region. So we had the development of ISIS and other wars, and it just adds one thing to another. When you tear apart a society, you don't know what you're going to get. And that's what we're doing in Iran. And you don't know where it's going to go or how far it's going to go. Ayatollah was a horrible person. My neighbor's a guy from Iran. I went to school with a lot of Iranians. I have good friends around the world, Iranians. And to see, they hated Ayatollah. But I don't know if they really want the country to be wrapped up in war where thousands and thousands of people are going to die, maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000. Is it worth it? That regime was disgusting and horrible for the killing they did of the protesters. But is this war going to solve it? Iran was already weak. Their nuclear supply had been bombed. They lost the support. They were weakened with Hamas and Hezbollah and so forth. They were a weak country. They're already not the threat they used to be. And if you wanted to bomb some of their missile sites, to take those out, fine. But we're getting deeper and deeper into it. And I think the actions, it's not worth it. It's a wrong thing to do, and I would be against it. I don't want to see another war. I don't want to see us dragged into another war where the costs are huge over there and huge here in terms of our economy and not addressing the problems we have to address here. There's hunger in this country. homelessness in this country. We could have medical insurance for what we're going to pay over there. Give everybody medical insurance and have a decent healthcare system instead of having people have to go to the emergency room for treatment because they don't have health insurance. I think it's a huge danger, and it's hard to stop it now when you've got people already on the battlefield, but you got to pull back from it.
Okay, another question that I have. Would you sponsor a bill to impeach President Trump and the Supreme Court justices who voted to give him immunity?
I would vote to impeach Donald Trump. However, my priority would be holding the people in the cabinet responsible. The people in the cabinet are going to be the future leaders of the Republican Party. And to me, it's more important that we make examples of them. For people that break the law, we need to hold them to the highest standard of the law. Donald Trump is a criminal. He should be impeached, yes. But we have to be very careful about not wasting our time in Congress. It's very important also that we pass meaningful legislation that improves people's lives. So sometimes we have to find common ground with people on the other side. But I would vote to impeach Donald Trump. I would focus a lot of my effort on the cabinet and making sure those people are impeached and removed from office. The Supreme Court's a different question. There's a Democrat out of Illinois named Sean Casten who has something called the Equal Voices Act. And he has a lot of really good ideas that I support and I pledge to support, like increasing the number of people in the House. Right now, the House of Representatives has grown as the Republic has grown. So right now, last time we increased the number of people in the House was in the 1920s. And the population of the country has grown so much from that time. His Equal Voices Act will make it so there's one representative for every 500,000 people. Right now, it's one representative for 800,000 people. This would create another 220 members of the House. We can pass this with a law that the president signs or gets overruled by Congress. This is fundamentally important before we can do things like taking money out of politics and getting rid of Citizens United, reforming the Supreme Court if we want to do that. So I support this Equal Voices Act, and there's more parts of that act. There's a second prong is dealing with a constitutional amendment so that we have 12 national at-large senators picked by popular vote. This, if we expand the House, it's also important because it'll shift the power from smaller states to states with larger populations. So right now, the Electoral College greatly favors the smaller states and overrepresents them. That might be one of the reasons why we've seen, and more than once in my lifetime, where whoever wins the national vote ends up losing the presidency. So this is a way to combat the power of the small states and give it to states that have more power, because the proportion of representative to the population will be fundamentally changed. And number three, the third prong of that is to add a 13-member panel for Supreme Court cases where the federal government is a plaintiff. It will take judges from the appeals court on a rotating basis and put them into a panel with the Supreme Court to decide a Supreme Court case. That is what I want to do. I would also want to, or we could have another way where we expand the Supreme Court and the current justices maybe have to pick that. But I'm not so sure on that. I think the thing that I want is the Equal Voices Act. That I call this the Get Shit Done plan, and it's on my website if you go to issues. So we have several ideas on my website. Number one, the prosperity agenda. We have an immigration reform plan, and we have the Get Shit Done plan. Those are all my websites. That's the problem that I see with the Congress has been dysfunctional for as long as I can remember, and this is the solution. We have to grow the House. It's happened when the population has grown, but we haven't done it over 100 years. And to me, that is the source of the congressional dysfunction that we see right now. That's how we end up with a representative like Greg Steube, who won't have a town hall or speak to his constituents because he has too many people to represent, too many competing parties. Can you imagine if we had this district split into two, one part maybe Sarasota, where we had a blue representative and maybe the rest would be a Republican representative? It would fundamentally change things, and it would give people more representation and a greater ability to speak to their representative. So those are some of that's my Save Democracy, Save Our Country reform that's imperative that we do.
I suspect Trump's ready for impeachment, but I wouldn't call it that right now, because people will say, oh, it's the Democrats jumping in to want impeachment so quickly. So I would say, we need to investigate. We need to investigate Trump, and we need to investigate the cabinet officers. And I think the case then would be pretty good or real good, probably immediate for impeachment. But I think that in terms of the Supreme Court, I would be for expanding it to 13 members, because there are 13 court districts in the country, and so you'd have essentially one member for not necessarily representing the district, but some decent distribution. And the fact was that Trump was able to ram in three people in a very short time, and that swayed the court, changed the court dramatically. And if we had more people on the court, and perhaps with if you had more people on the court, any one president would not be able to influence the court so dramatically. They might be able to, even if they appointed 3, that's a 3 out of 13. So it's not the dramatic change that has happened because of Trump's appointments. So I think a 13-member court would be more reasonable over time. It might also, another idea would be to limit the term limits, because frankly, some people want to stay too long. And so maybe an 18-year term limit on the court might be reasonable to keep the court youthful and in touch with society and what's happening in the country. And they need a code of conduct. I think what standard do they have? And they're writing their own standards. And some of the activities have been quite questionable. And they seem to be getting gifts from rich people and flights and vacations and mortgages and school loans and so forth. So have to grab hold of that. And if the Supreme Court doesn't make its own rules of conduct, the Congress has to impose it on them. So there is a solid standard of conduct. I think there is a slip into the discussion of elections. I'm not sure that having more representatives in Congress would be a good idea. In the great old days, one representative would represent 30,000 people, and that was great because you'd probably know the person and see him down at the local inn and at the trading post or whatever, and so you'd know that you're a congressperson. But whether you got 800,000 or 500,000, I don't think it's going to make much difference, and it might just add to more chaos in Washington with that damn many representatives running around. There are other ways, and I think you have to look at maybe sometimes they say some sort of proportional representation from a state. So many of the states are so gerrymandered, they're set, even though maybe half the state is Democrat and half the state is Republican. The Republicans might hold 90% of the representative seats, and it's due to gerrymandering, the way they could draw the lines to their advantage. So I think we have to look at how to restrict gerrymandering, and also how to and stop the gerrymandering mid-decade. That was never intended. You change the seats based on the census every 10 years, and that's got to stick instead of fooling around. There's too much manipulation of the system in terms of voting and everything else. The rules are being put in place. It's making it extremely difficult for us to really have a democracy we could trust in. I like the idea of ranked choice voting. I like the idea that you have a large number of people on the ballot, and they then are selected based on their, the number of votes they accumulate from those who have dropped out at the bottom. So that gives people more choice, and it's less focused on the party and more focused on the person. So I think that might be we need to look at alternatives, and I will do that in Congress, look for alternatives to make our democracy stronger.
Okay, we're almost out of time for our hour, but if we have a question from the floor, we would welcome it. Does anybody have a question from the floor? Okay, let's take one from Zoom land.
This question is from Cody Keller. He says, FLVCS has, for a long time, supported the notion that corporations should not have the same rights as people. We also believe that money is not speech, and Citizens United must be overturned. Until we fix these two problems, we will not have a real democracy. As you might know, there's a bill before the House, the We the People Amendment. It would abolish corporate personhood and regulate campaign donations. Money will no longer be considered free speech. This bill stands for the same principle that Rana walked to Tallahassee for. Unless the bill is voted for in this year, which is not likely, the bill will have to be reintroduced into Congress. The question is, if you are elected in the next Congress, would you co-sponsor the We the People Amendment and work to have it reintroduced in the House?
We're almost out of time, so we'll give each candidate 1 minute on this question.
I would have to look at that act before I committed to signing it. But what I will say is that this is why we have to grow the House, because we can't pass legislation that will sit like that year after year and not get passed, because Congress is dysfunctional. As long as I can remember, it's been dysfunctional. I believe the source of the dysfunction is because we don't have representatives that represent us, just like we have here. There's nobody that we can go to if we have a problem. I speak to different people in this district, people that are afraid to leave their house based on what they look like. They're afraid of getting picked up by ICE. And their own representative will not take their feedback and then give that to DHS, that it's a problem. So my goal would be to expand the House and then get rid of Citizens United and limit people to $100,000 political contributions, and a corporation is not a person.
It sounds like a bill I would support. The fact is that corporations are not people, and they've ruined our elections. It's been it's now, you see Trump's inauguration, all the super rich men are right behind him. That's what's happening in our country, that's being bought off. We're not having the democracy we intended to have. People are not represented. People are not equal in this country. And I think that, I guess there's not much else to say on that. Just not, it has to be, we have to stop Citizens United to bring back our democracy.
Okay, we're out of time. So what I would like to do is have everybody give these two candidates a big hand and thank them for running. It's not an easy thing to do. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And no further ado, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Dave.